Hustlers, creators, conversationalists. You are now listening to the Girlfriends Podcast.
I guess that's just emotion.
Hey girlfriends, and welcome back.
Welcome.
To another episode with TG and AV. We are here to talk about the biases that we as Black women, as a Black community, face in the healthcare system, but we're focusing on women because Black women are dying at a disproportionate rate than white women.
We are not valued
when it comes to childbirth. So we just want to explore that. Taylor came with some pretty interesting facts that I'll let you read off to us, and then we can just go on from there, because it's not just something that's in our heads, it's fact, and it's pretty damn scary.
Let me find it or whatever. Hello everybody. But yes, as she was saying, we are not valued with the healthcare system, but we're not valued as a whole, Black women. But I'm gonna stay on task or whatever.
I mean, it's something that you learn too while you're looking that up. Like, it's something that you learn too. If you've ever taken an African American Studies class, African diaspora class, you see that there have been biases throughout history. I mean, we already know of racism, but there are biases and there's discrimination that still goes on to this day when it comes to us Black people. And I can speak from my own personal experience when it comes to the healthcare system. It was one thing learning about it and learning about how they don't take our pain as seriously, or they tend to look over our health concerns when we do go in to get checked, or when we do go to the emergency room or the hospital. But it was another thing for me to experience it firsthand. When I started going to the OBGYN, you hit 21 and you have to start going regularly. You go get a pap smear every year. When I went, by that time I had been on birth control since I was 18. And I was told by my OBGYN that I should immediately get off of the pill because I get something called migraines with aura. So I tend to see like flashing lights or whatever before my migraine comes on. She told me apparently in the UK, women who experience this type of migraine, they're forbidden, it's illegal for them to even take birth control that has estrogen in it, because this can essentially cause them to have a stroke. And I've heard of cases where women have had strokes being on birth control, and that's one of the factors. So at that point I'm like, okay, well, take me off of the pill, but I want to stay on birth control because ain't nobody trying to get pregnant. And so she recommended the IUD. The IUD is what is placed into your uterus, and it's this T-shaped birth control instrument, and it pretty much releases the birth control into your body, and you can have that in you for up to 3 years. And so I was like, yeah, let me go ahead and do that. She was like, yeah, it's awesome. You don't have to worry about remembering to take a pill every day. So it was extremely painful getting the procedure. She said some people don't feel nothing. Sometimes it's painful for others. Like, I was in tears, pain. But that doesn't even matter. What matters is that after getting that IUD, I experienced significant amounts of pain from it. I would get these sharp cramps that would come in waves to the point where it made me like double down. There were times where I'd be in public and it would hit me, and I would literally have to crouch down to the floor and wait for it to pass. Just imagine being in like New York or something and that hits you and you just crouch down to the floor. I mean, in New York they're not gonna pay attention, but it looks like something is seriously wrong. I went to my OBGYN multiple times, and she wrote it off as nothing. She would check. She was like, well, your IUD hasn't moved. There's nothing wrong with you. And that was it. No looking further into it, no tests. And it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get this thing removed, because I don't want it to be something life-threatening. And they wait too late to take it out, or they wait too late to look further into it. So I got rid of the IUD, and since then I just haven't been on birth control at all. I've used what is called the rhythmic method, but that's just one little case in which I felt like they didn't take my pain seriously, and I feel like they don't really care about what's going on with us until it's too late.
I agree on that. I was trying to think if I had like a personal, example to give.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't necessarily think of one, but consciously, I mean, not to steer too off of it. I think we're going to get into it a little bit later, but I mean, well, that's my choice, so ignore me. I was going to speak on like birth control and how I haven't really done enough research, but how I feel like, pretty much it's encouraged more so like in Black communities. I feel so like, okay, like the healthcare clinic and things like that, because it's cheaper. It's pretty much free to go there if you aren't working or in school. So pretty much like what birth control was made for. Yes, we know to control births, but if we go more to like parent planhood, is that right? Yeah. How pretty much like how that was made or created to more so decrease the births of Black women. So I was trying to say that I may be an example of that in a sense, because I take birth control, but that's my choice to do so. But it was heavily encouraged, but it could be heavily encouraged to other populations as far as demographics of color, people that are different colors and races. But
I mean, let's not try to dress it up. Racism is still a real thing. So I think Taylor's trying to say pretty much they encourage us as people of color, as Black people, to take birth control because they want there to be more white people in this country than they want Black people to be in this country. And that could very well be true. A lot of things are rooted in racism. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I mean, the person who founded Parent Planhood was a fucking racist. And the goal was to essentially exterminate Black people so that white people could flourish.
To keep the common race, or so that they can be the common race?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. So the facts I wanted to read really quickly about racial disparity pretty much highlights that a high rate of maternal mortality in the U.S. has alarmed researchers. And one statistic that has been especially concerning is that those that are Black mothers in the U.S. die 3 times to 4 times at a higher rate than white mothers. One of the widest of all racial disparities in women's health. It also says, to put it another way, a Black woman is 22% more likely to die from heart disease than a white woman, 71% more likely to perish from cervical cancer, and 243% more likely to die from pregnancy or childbirth related. That's wow.
243% more likely to die from childbirth, just from bringing a child into the world. That's why it's no surprise Beyonce experienced difficulties, Serena experienced difficulties. It just seems like they tend to neglect women who have given birth, Black women who have given birth, more so than they do white women. And it's really sad, because that really makes me fear having kids one day.
I was reading too, further along in that article, it was talking about this young lady. I don't remember where she was located, but she continued to tell her doctor, which reminds me of somewhat of your situation, that she's had heart attacks before, and like during her pregnancy or in the process of giving birth. Oh no, she was just pregnant. She felt as though she was going to have another heart attack or something of that sort, because she knew the symptoms that would come along. And it took for her to have another heart attack for them to focus and pay attention, because they were telling her that her heart attacks were based on obesity, but she really had fluid in that area connecting to her heart, and so they weren't looking as closely as they needed to. Even down to the aspects of, look at most of the people that are on like Medicaid and things like that as people of color. So our treatment, I feel as though they may look at it as though, this is practically, it's not free treatment, but it's a cheaper treatment. So therefore, I feel as though we're going to get cheaper services. Like, they're not going to aid to us as quickly, or feel as though that our issues are as of urgency as someone else's, because like, it all depends on that particular healthcare place, or where you may be located, or who the faculty are. It all depends on those individuals, and that's more so what I was reading, is a lot of it based on racism, and depending on depending on
your access to healthcare.
No, not the access to healthcare, but the staff that are within the healthcare facility that the person is at. Like, it depends on those individuals and how they may think and their perception of African Americans. And then going deeper into it, just the way the medical model, the system was made, like, we don't refer to that, we don't use that now, at least they shouldn't, because the way it's structured in a way of it's not structured in a holistic way, if that makes sense. It's not structured in a way that, I guess that's the best way of putting it. It's based on like archaic thoughts. Like, it's based on
racist thoughts.
Yeah.
So let's call it what it is. The thing is I think a lot of times people also try to say that it's due to lack of access, when people don't realize more white people benefit from Medicaid, or more. There are a lot of white people who, just as much as there are white people who are affluent, there are also a lot of white people who are poor, who don't have access to the resources that they need, but they are still treated with more attentiveness and with more care than a black person would.
Even down to, not to interrupt you, but it's in everything. They're treated with such care, even down to being arrested. I saw recently on the Shade Room, this white guy, he was arrested for attacking this other white man who was a Trump supporter at this rally, and he stopped his truck and got out and started beating this old man. He was at least 61 years old, the man that was getting beaten. But when the police came and arrested him, it was not abrupt, it was not violent. They're willing to talk it out, negotiate, but black people don't get that same respect, and because we're a threat.
Why are we such a threat? It's a question. It's just really weird, and it's really sad that we have to depend on these people to save our lives in crisis, but they don't even value our lives enough to do so.
And I'll take that. I think it's more so when I said because we're a threat, we're perceived as a threat. I like to say everything is based on perception, and therefore I feel as though this is all history based. So how we're perceived to be a threat, therefore that's how we're treated.
Right, I agree with that. And I was talking to Taylor earlier about how, even when it comes to gynecology, it was built on torturing black women to create these tools that they use to this day to treat us, to perform pap smears and all these operations. Imagine the black women that had to lie on a table with no anesthesia at all and go through the type of pain that they went through just for the sake of these white doctors experimenting with them and creating the things that they use today. That makes me sick. It really eats me up that we've been used, so to speak, as kind of like dummies, I don't know, they just don't value our bodies, and it kind of shows up in the healthcare system today when they pass off our pain, because they also for some reason feel like black people don't experience as much pain. We're more tolerant to pain. When we go to the doctor and express the concerns we had and symptoms, they kind of write it off as not being anything kind of like in our head or whatever, and they may send us home with painkillers or even placebos. And it's not just the experiences I have in my own personal experiences and the things that I've learned in African American studies. I feel like my dad's life could have been saved if they would have taken his health concerns more seriously. Back then, my dad first started experiencing these symptoms, he went to the doctor for chest pains, and they gave him muscle relaxers, and kind of said, I don't know, why would they give you a muscle relaxer? Maybe because they feel like, I don't fucking know, a strain in your chest? I don't know. But they gave him muscle relaxers and sent him home, and he went back, and they continued to write it off as not being anything serious until he had pneumonia, and he's running a 105 fever. And he goes back to the doctors, and that's when, after, I don't know, 2-3 times of going back months later, they finally ran serious tests and found out that he had stage 4 lung cancer. What do you think could have been different if they would have just caught it early on, but instead for months, maybe even years, because chest pains wasn't something that he started experiencing just that year in 2012. It's something that he dealt with for some time, and it's like if they would have taken his pain seriously, if they would have treated him with the same care that they would have a white man or a white woman, I feel like I still would have had my dad today. So I don't trust the healthcare system at all.
And it's not just you. It's not, everything you're saying is speaking for Black people or people of color, that community, when it comes to the mindset that we have when it comes to the healthcare system. And that's what makes it suck, because if we're not going to focus too much on that, but when we think about mental health concerns, they don't trust that. You know, we don't really talk about our issues and how we feel and things like that, because that is a reason that could, you know, relate to that. Like, we don't trust the healthcare system. Like, they're not going to value our thoughts. You know, it's just a white lady writing down how I feel. She doesn't know how I feel. She's not from where I'm from. She doesn't have to struggle the way I struggle. So, not
only that, you notice when a white kid shoots up the school, or a white person does anything crazy and psychotic, they write it off as them having some sort of mental disorder. But they don't do that for the Black kids who grow up watching people get killed in front of them, who experience serious trauma, who really should have be evaluated for that trauma.
Who's scared to wear a fucking black hoodie to the fucking store to get some Skittles.
They don't take that into consideration. But a suburban kid who has pretty much been given everything, who has been given the privilege to do whatever the fuck they want, can go somewhere and shoot it up and kill and hurt and just be kind of like labeled as an innocent kid who just snapped, who just had a psychotic break, who just wasn't in his right mind. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And once again, going back to giving birth, that's something that I fear doing. I would love to have kids one day, but I also am deeply fearful of not being able to raise my kids because a doctor overlooked internal bleeding that I had, or high blood pressure, or whatever it is that they tend to overlook when it comes to us.
I just look at it as though, you know, that's something that I understand, like, you're concerned about. I hope eventually you'll not be. Well, it's important that you do. I'm still
gonna have kids, but it's just scary.
I feel as though, you know, what's gonna happen is gonna happen, but I get it. It is scary because, you know, that article I was recently just reading, there was this young lady, her name was Shyla. I don't remember, but point is, she was doing research on the healthcare disparities, and she died 2 weeks later after giving birth.
At 36.
At 36. So it's just like, can you really research your way, like, to
what do you do?
To a space where, you know, you're really informed and you know what to do in those situations? Like, if it's gonna happen, unfortunately, it's gonna happen. I just hate that the healthcare system, or just this country that's been built on all these things, that we have to experience these situations.
Right.
I hate that. I was just gonna say how it's kind of off, but not really, like how different situations can really affect you, and like as far as the injustice on different levels when it comes to like the police and things like that. Honestly, you guys, just how I may feel a little nervous about having a child, every time I see a police car, I'm nervous. I mean, not just nervous that I may get pulled over like anybody else, because we're not like anybody else. I'm nervous that I might be Sandra Bland. Like, I'm nervous that this may happen, like something may happen to me. Like, I get very nervous, and I put my car on cruise control because
you don't want to. Yeah, that's a real thing. Like,
I was considering having a program about emotional regulation. And I was like, you know, it would be good if I was in a headspace where I can invite like a police officer or something to speak, just to decrease the scaredness that our people may have. And I was like, I'm not even past it, so I can't even have them there.
And I feel like this is one of those episodes where we don't really, usually we try to provide a solution and provide tips, but like she said, there was someone who focused so much on kind of armoring herself with knowledge to avoid falling victim to this statistic, and she died from having a child. So
2 weeks later. And that goes back to like, you can have complications just as high as you can die giving childbirth. You can definitely die after giving childbirth, and how the complications that you have during pregnancy can continue to follow along with you after you have your child.
Right.
So I don't know what's in the water. I don't know what's in our food. I don't know what it is that may be targeted to us that is affecting our health when it comes to producing a child. But I feel like something's tainted. I mean, did you hear the 243%?
243% more likely to die from childbirth than white women.
I think we need to read. We need some books on this.
Yeah, so I guess still armor yourself with knowledge. Read up on it. Try to be more healthy. Try to prevent the things that could potentially be getting in the way of having a safe delivery. And until next time, be blessed.
Be blessed.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's show. Catch the Girlfriends podcast every Saturday at 11 a.m. here on 72.9 The Voice.